Hi guys, it's Vanessa. I'm here to talk to you guys about more things that I've read during Nonfiction November. I think after this video there's going to be one more wrap up, but I have a lot of thoughts about these books, and so I wanted to devote this on 4 books. I'll first talk about You Don't Have to Say You Love Me by Sherman Alexie, probably one of the most visible Native American writers writing today. I want to encourage you to read his books if you haven't. This is only my second, but he's an author that I want to continue reading, and I'm very happy that I read his memoir this year. This is kind of a genre-bending book that mixes memoir and poetry to tell stories about Sherman Alexie's family, about the loss he has faced, about his childhood. He describes it in this book as it being all these pieces of a quilt. It's not a cohesive from beginning to end kind of narrative about his life. It is more little stories and then poems interspersed with all of that, and really how that is comparable to how his mother loved making quilts. Even the end pages have quilts on them. So I thought that was a nice touch. My favorite thing about Alexie is really how he blends so many feelings that he has. He's focusing on feelings of resentment, anger, sadness, but he's also focusing on humor and sweet moments in his life that he can remember about his family as well. This book is bittersweet, it is self-deprecating, it is thoughtful, and I went from being super heartbroken hearing about him explain the place rape has in his family story and how it has affected so many of the members of his family, being sad about that. I would laugh out loud about his bowel movement. That chapter made me laugh so hard, and I read it out loud to my boyfriend and he was just shaking his head. I don't usually laugh at potty humor, but I love his voice and I love how he blends those two things together. Just breaking my heart one page and then making me laugh the next. This book is definitely sentimental, sensitive, sometimes overthinks a lot as well, and it also conflicts itself, and he calls attention to how memory is not necessarily what actually occurred. He's just very self-aware in that way, and how he speaks about what he thinks he remembers versus like asking other members of his families how they remember it and trying to see what's really the truth. I definitely don't think this book is for everyone, especially because he is very sensitive. I'm a sensitive person like him, so I feel the ways that he does. Some people might not like that. I also really loved some parts in this, including a chapter where he talks about how he went from being like a super beloved person in the town that he went to school in that was like basically all white, and he was the only native person there. Then going back to that town many years later and realizing that a large majority of the people there, like 70-something% of the people there, voted for Donald Trump, and him trying to come to terms and understand how he can fit into this white society and be accepted and loved and be popular in this society, but that it seems like it's because he's a singular person. The way he talks about it, it's like we're okay with one single, minority, but we are not okay with a group of minorities, and then that's how he felt that town reacted and why they voted for Donald Trump in such large numbers. There's also a chapter towards the end of this book that he focuses on the meaning of the picture on the front cover, and I won't say anything about it, just that part really, I had to pause my audiobook and just sit there and take it in and just be sad about it. I definitely would recommend the audiobook if you like listening to memoirs on audiobook, especially because of the poetry parts. I thought that listening to the poetry, for me, it always works a little bit better than me actually reading it. The next book that I read also on audiobook was A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. This is Sue Klebold's memoir almost 20 years after the events of Columbine, in which her son was involved in the massacre and the killings that occurred there, and it's really her story of what that whole time has been like in all of these years that have passed in chronological order, hearing the news and her fearing for her son's safety to her realizing that her son was one of the 2 that did the killings. I think Sue Klebold's main point in writing this book is to show to us that even present and loving parents might not always know the true mental state of their children, and that it's very important for us as, I'm not a parent, but when I do become a parent, to be more inquisitive and to try to get your child to talk to you more. She really wants to shatter this conception that her son was a monster, not because it makes her feel better about her son, but because she kind of wants to show us that her son is not an anomaly in the mental state that he was in. She wants us to check on our children more often and to evaluate what she terms their brain health. She has, in the time after Columbine, really focused her time trying to research and study and talk about brain health, talking about suicide and talking about murder-suicide as well. I also thought in this book it was really interesting how she focused on how her son and the person that he committed these crimes with were kind of a dynamic duo in that the ways that they fed off each other, her son being a suicidal person and the other person who committed these crimes and his, what many mental health professionals have termed as psychopathy, and how he fed off of Sue Klebold's son's suicidal ideation as a thrill that got him to continue to want to plan this out. Not that any of that excuses or explains why this occurred. There were many, many factors involved. But learning about that duo, that is also important for parents to look at their children's friends and how they interact with each other and the ways that they feel comfortable or not comfortable around each other. And lastly, she spent a lot of time talking about bullying in this, and I like that as well, because I think one of the criticisms about Dave Cullen's Columbine, which I read and reviewed in my last wrap-up, is that he doesn't focus a lot of attention on bullying. Like, he mentions it, but he's like, that's not the reason why this occurred. And he really like sidesteps it and pushes it aside. Obviously, bullying, psychopathy, suicidal ideation, like none of those things explain this fully. But it is important for us to understand where bullying as a national topic of debate was at in 1999, and also the examples that she gives here and how she talks about other people and their experiences with bullying in this high school. It was really brushed aside and no one really gave it the attention that it deserved. So I like that this added to what I read in Dave Cullen's Columbine. Obviously, Columbine is a lot bigger in scope and deals with a lot more people, but I think this is more of a personal story of Sue Klebold trying to understand her son and why he did this, and then turning it into an activist life for herself. You can tell that she is a kind and proactive person. She just seems like a person that has really continued to grapple with the fact that she loves her son, but that she also feels for what he did and that she will never forgive what happened. I especially loved it on audiobook. She narrates it herself. The next book that I'll talk about, I probably will have a lot of thoughts about. It has been probably one of the most thought-provoking books that I've read this year. I haven't really heard anybody else talk about it. It's not available through my library, so it feels like it's kind of a book that's under the radar. But if you are at all interested in discussions about campus sexual assault, this is a book that you need to read. It is Violated by Paula Lavigne and Mark Schlabach. It is a book about the sexual assault crisis that occurred on Baylor's campus from 2011 to 2016 mostly. So campus sexual assault, I felt like, was a really big topic of discussion. Like, I vividly remember Kirsten Gillibrand talking about it a lot. I remember the woman walking around with her mattress, and I felt like that discussion has died down a little bit. Now we're in this whole new movement of Me Too and talking about sexual assault in Hollywood, in Congress, and political spheres, and in workplace. You can tell that this is a big topic, and it has a lot of places where it happens, but I am especially interested in campus sexual assault because a lot of this unfolded while I was in college. So 2011 to 2015 is when I was an undergrad at the University of Florida, and all this stuff in Baylor started happening around 2011 to 2016. So it kind of overlapped. There were lots of stories about campus sexual assault. This one I think is different because it focuses on how Baylor's situation got more and more damning over time. It was something that just wouldn't go away because the lack of Title IX compliance, as well as the football team's involvement in a lot of these accusations, the institutional failures were so high up the ladder at such echelons of power, going from coaching staff to people in the Judicial Affairs Office, even going up to the president, Ken Starr. And yes, it's the same Ken Starr that led the hearings to impeach Bill Clinton. So what to me made this book so difficult to put down is the fact that this has so many layers to it. One thing that made this super interesting to me is Baylor's Baptist message and the religious affiliation that they give off to us. So a lot of the victims out of this whole crisis decided to go to Baylor because of its religious affiliation. What they really found was that there was no compassion for them when they reported the violence that they felt. That's number one. That makes it like, wow. When people are out there saying like, we are a Christian university, we lead ourselves with this Christian message, and then having these women that decided to go there for that reason not being heard. So that's a big failing. Number two is the push and pull between Baylor trying to stay this small Christian private university versus a lot of people in the regents and in the president's office, etc., who wanted Baylor to really grow and to get bigger. Gaining national prominence is a big thing that a lot of universities really strive for. I know at my university at UF, it was this big push to try to get to national eminence. We really wanted to be in the top 10 of the US News and World Report rankings of public universities. That was something that they really wanted. It leads them to be better known, it grows their brand, and it grows their revenues. And that was something that Baylor was also grappling with. Do we stay a small private university, or do we become a huge national prominence university that brings in the best of the best? And then number three is the thing that really makes this book, and that is the football team's place in all of this. The football team was an integral part of Baylor's hope to national eminence. Here in the United States, college football is so big. I come from a big football school, a big SEC football school, and just the importance that football has on our campus, what it does to your brand, really. It brings a lot of money, it brings a lot of attention, and that's just gonna have more people thinking about going to your school. All of this preeminence talk was happening during the 2011 season when they had their first person win a Heisman Trophy. It also happened during an era with this coach Art Briles, almost made it to the college football playoffs as well. So there's a lot of things going on here that's gonna make you try to shield your eyes from any accusations or any rumblings that you hear about sexual misconduct against your players. I think for me here, the problem was that the coaching staff, that the university leaders, and this includes the people in judicial affairs who were not properly trained in Title IX, all the way up to Ken Starr, didn't know what they were supposed to be doing, didn't implement ways to better answer to these Title IX compliance issues, to the 2011 Dear Colleague letter, through the Obama administration, and the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in 2013. These are all things that are there in place to try to protect people from sexual assault and sexual harassment in university. Baylor was nowhere to being what it should be when it came to these things. They did not do enough to ensure the safety of their students. They did not do enough to investigate reports that came to them about this. They actually discouraged a lot of people from reporting, and because they were a Baptist university, there were instances where they were asking women who were reporting why they were drinking that night and why they were having sex outside of marriage, because that was looked down upon as a Christian university. And by focusing on all of these things, they're really not shining a light on the truth of the matter, which is that there were serial rapists on campus that were accused of raping women over the course of more than 2 or 3 years. There were serious accusations from other schools where these players transferred to Baylor that they had been domestic abusers and had had to go to anger management classes and had had to do all these probationary things to get out of the trouble that they were in because they beat their girlfriends. And there was no connection between these transfer schools to Baylor or from other authorities that Baylor should have sought out to know about the students that they were allowing on their football team. That's the big thing here to me. If they would have stopped these people the first or second time this occurred, some of these people wouldn't have been accused of rape 6 or 7 times. That's the real institutional failure of Baylor, that they did not truly investigate these accusations. So it's a variety of things. It is them not trying to see who these players are that are coming to play for them. It is the actual people in the university offices who are not properly trained in Title IX, who are not following the Dear Colleague letter, the coaches who were trying to keep their players out of trouble and had contacts with people to try to keep them under the radar so they wouldn't make the news. You need a Title IX coordinator. They didn't have one until many years after they were supposed to. Honestly, even at the top, Ken Starr was sent emails about this, and he just didn't do enough in the day-to-day running of the university where he would have known about these allegations and about this crisis to do more for that. This has led to a lot of new guidelines from an external review that they did with a law firm to better implement Title IX. They just were not good at accommodating women victims either, and a lot of them dropped out, and it is very, very sad because they wanted to go to Baylor their entire lives and then found that Baylor was not receptive to their allegations and was not receptive to getting them mental health professionals, accommodating their class schedules so that they wouldn't be in contact with the people that they are accusing. Just in general, I feel so bad for these women. I'm really glad that they told their stories because that's a lot of the reason why changes occurred, especially a woman named Jasmine Hernandez. So I would definitely recommend Violated if you are at all interested in campus sexual assault. The first part of it tells the victim stories, and that is very difficult and harrowing and heavy, and then it kind of turns it on Baylor as an institution. It is journalistic. It is done by two ESPN investigative journalists, and the ways that they talk about the sexual assaults are very clinical, so they don't really focus a lot on that. They just want to give you the facts before they talk about how Baylor didn't help them. And last but not least, we'll leave off on a good note because the last three things have been sad. Dear Fahrenheit 451 by Annie Spence. This is a book that is really a love letter to books and to libraries. Annie Spence is a public librarian, and she wrote this book to talk about a lot of recommendations, to talk about how patrons think about different books that she likes and books that she doesn't like, and it's just really fun to hear her opinions on books. I loved her voice. It was very punny, it was humorous, it was lighthearted. Listening to this on audiobook I think is the way to go, and I kind of wish that we just had a whole list of all of the books that she mentions because it's a lot. But definitely if you read, you will either have read a lot of these books or you will have heard about these books. So I would definitely recommend this book if you're looking for something a little bit more lighthearted. Definitely very sweet and very amusing, and it was only like 5.5 hours on audiobook. And that is it for me and all the books that I want to talk about in this wrap up. I'll come back to you soon with another wrap up. I also have lots of videos planned for the near future, so get ready for December videos. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.